Hey, y'all. Welcome to Book World, The Great Escape. I'm author CJ Peterson. My co-host over here is author Michael Scott Clifton. We're going to be talking about what's in a name today. But before we get there, Mike, how was your weekend?
Well, we were talking earlier before we went on the podcast, and we spent the weekend in Abilene with my son, and then my daughter and son-in-law and our grandson also met us up there. So we got sort of a little mini family reunion. We really enjoyed that, except for the 5-hour one-way drive there and 5 hours back. It was an awesome experience, and the weather was not bad. It was not. Abilene been there often enough to know it's a place of extremes. It's either very hot, or it's very cold, or it's very dry, or it's very wet. But we seem to have got maybe one of those edgeways, where it was cool enough to be enjoyable. It did rain all night, the last night we were there, but we were leaving the next day anyway, so that was great. Next weekend, next Saturday, I'll be at the Winnsboro Book Festival. Been to that before, but it's been a number of years. In fact, it's been pre-COVID, and looking forward to going back. We have sort of a little get-together Friday night, so Melanie and I are going to go and meet some of the other authors and there, and kind of network. A lot of times these events, as you well know, CJ, it's not so much selling books as making connections with people and, getting to know other authors and even, getting speaking engagements, possibilities for that. So I'm really looking forward to that. And also, we both will be at the Northeast Texas Writers Organization, NetWO's Spring Writers Conference, which is this Saturday on the campus of Northeast Texas Community College, which is just south of Mount Pleasant. It's going to be a great conference. CJ is going to be speaking on podcasting. Gary is going to be speaking on advertising. Dana, as we know her, Nancy Hutchins, great author, is going to be talking about building characters. And I'm kind of interested to hear what Alan Fisher has to do about a keyhole gap, which is it's very useful, particularly in newspapers and any kind of publication like magazines and things like that. So,
and we had talked about beforehand, you can actually go to, is it netwo.com, netwo.com?
www.netwo.org.
Okay.
And it has the registration link there. Still time to register. The lateness of it, most people, we were talking earlier again, usually register the last minute. So, if someone's listening, they would like to register for this great conference, there's still time to do it. On Facebook links that I've posted, I do have the actual link. It'll take you straight to the registration site. You don't even have to go to the NetWo, organization and make your way through the other links. You can go straight to it. Just look up www.Michael Scott Clifton or Michael Scott Clifton on Facebook or Mike Clifton on Facebook, and you can see the posts I put up there with the link.
Definitely. And I will have my books there. So feel free to get a hold of me if you were interested in any of my books. I do the special bookstore pricing anywhere that I appear. But I'm super excited. I'm one of the first ones that's going to be speaking on Saturday. And I'm going to be talking about podcasting 101, the ins and outs of it, and, how to do it, why to do it. So, I'm super excited about that. And then the next week after that, I'm going to be in Kilgore, Texas for Kilgore Geekend, which is, we often joke that it's basically a Comic-Con. If a Comic-Con and a street fair had a baby, that would be Kilgore Geekend. It's super supported by the community. It's literally Main Street in Kilgore. So come on down. I'll be in one of the inside buildings. We're not 100% sure where yet, but we'll get there. And then I'll be heading to, Kimo Kauai and Fan Expo Dallas are my June targets, but I will be appearing with the table at Kilgore Geekend and also at the speaking engagement I'm super excited for. Went last year. Talked about publishers last year, so that was fun. So today we're going to be talking, though, about what's in a name. So people are like, well, where do your characters get your names? How do they get their names? That sort of thing. So let's start with you. How do your characters get your names, and are they important?
Well, I haven't been to a book event yet, and I'm sure you can relate to the CJ. Well, I haven't been asked the question you just presented. How
Mhm.
do you come up with names for your characters? And as a dyed-in-the-wool pantser,
Mhm.
uh, I don't have a list of prepared names. I have names, that kind of roll around my head like rocks, so to speak. And to me, a character's name has to fit the identity of your character.
Mhm.
They have to look like the name. They have to act like the name. They have to be in a situation that would lend itself to the name. So if you had a female character called Agnes, for example, in 2023, who is a 18-year-old or 19-year-old teenager who is wild and free,
Mm,
I don't know if that name Agnes fits that character.
I could hear 2023 because a lot of the older names are coming back, like Emma and Agnes and Abigail. And so some of those older ones are coming back. And I could see maybe somebody who's kind of artsy and humble,
Right.
like super humble, but not a party animal. I can't see that as an Agnes.
A good example is I have a YA novel called Edison Jones and the Anti-Grav Elevator. And Edison is a 12-year-old boy genius who invents cool stuff and goes on cool adventures. So Edison, as in the inventor Thomas Edison,
Mhm.
is, sort of gives you a clue right from the jump what the character is about, and and the kind of personality they might have.
Mhm.
So anyway, I think that characters are very important, CJ, to your story. I think that characters uh, that have names that don't fit the personality and behavior that you describe in the book is a very, very big no, big red mark on what you should never start doing. And as far as coming up with names, and you may be different, CJ, but I see I've lived long enough, okay, that I have come in contact with thousands of people, especially at a public school where I'm at, which I've remarked before is target rich environment for characters and things like that. Or go sit in a busy mall and look around and watch people walking. And I've sort of have with me, I have the personality in mind before I pick the name. I don't pick the name and then try to find the personality to fit the name. It's all the personality of the person, of the character comes first. And then it's just, I'm searching through that gray matter in my head to think of a name that I feel is an apt name in terms of how an average person, average reader would react to it. And others may do it differently. They may have the name first and then try to write a personality or character that goes with it. But I do the opposite.
Mhm. Well, for me, it's kind of like naming your child. I do a lot of times. That's the one thing I do research on. Being a poster child for a pantser, there's not a lot that I do unless I'm doing like a historical fiction novel or it's occupation that I'm not familiar with. I will do some research. But when it comes to names, a lot of times they have meanings. So believe it or not, I go to like the parent baby name sites. But one thing I do that might be a little bit different is I go to Dreams Time first and I find the picture of the model of what I want the main character to look like.
Okay.
So that gives me like a visual picture. So for example, in Appointed Time. So there are all four people on the front cover of this for those who are listening. It's the cover of Appointed Time. And I have Holly, who's the redhead. And then I have Blake, who's the brunette, and then Deanna's up in the corner, and then Adam is down the bottom. And what I did is I found these four models, and I'm like, yeah, okay, these are the four that I'm thinking of. That's kind of my general overall. And so I searched the sites, and I was like, okay, how am I going to name these kids? And so I'm like, long story short, they're for those who haven't read the series, there ends up being pretty much a child for each letter of the alphabet. So then I had to figure out the names. They actually came to me in a dream, which is kind of fun, that kind of mid-sleep, mid-waking point in the morning. So it's one of those where I grabbed my phone and just started typing as fast as I could the different names, because there's 27 names. So I had to write them all down. And so then it was like, okay, so which one's going to go with which kid? And so I knew, okay, well, the first one, I'm not sure where the cutoff point is on, how many are in this part, how many are in this part, how many are in that part. But I was able to figure out, okay, it's going to start with these 4. And I'm thinking they're going to be these names. And so out of that, what I did, like I said, is I went to the baby name thing. And I kind of got, like, sometimes some of them were the letters. I want to make sure that, yes, this is the one I want for this particular letter of the alphabet. And I read the meaning behind them, because sometimes there are meanings behind them and they need to be very special. And sometimes it's just a matter of that's what fits. For Chain Reaction, they are Trip and Tori. And I knew immediately, they were going to be Trip and Tori. They had to be names. I had the pictures, and they had to be names that kind of went together. And so, again, I did the research. A lot of people know that I'm Irish. So a lot of mine are Celtic-based names, some of them, in doing that. And when it comes to last names, that's just as important as the first names. You don't want all Smith and Jones and Jefferson or Jackson and, Miller. You don't want just all common names. You want names that are unique. And so a lot of times I will look up that particular area. When I was doing the Team Angel series, I literally had to look up these names in Ireland, in Russia, in Jerusalem, in Mexico. I had to look up these specific names and find out, okay, which names kind of go together. In Russia, the females, the last name ends with an A. So it's like whatever name you had, I had to make sure to put that twist on the end of it. I had to make sure they went together. So a lot of times it just depends on, where it's at, what they look like. I had an idea in my head of what I want them to look like, but I had to go find them. So a lot of times what I do, like I said, is I go find them on Dreams Time. I find that particular model, I get that picture, and I go from there. And then I start to build stuff. And a lot of times that's where I start. I know it sounds weird, but
no, I mean, it sounds perfectly logical to me. I mean, you stop and, even if you're not a pantser, as we are, okay, you're a planner, you like everything planned out, right? You're still, the same general rules will probably apply in what drives an author or writer to pick a name for one of their characters. First thing, you would think of is the personality of this person. Are they hot-headed? Are they calm and cool, etc.? Second thing will be, what do they look like? Are they looking, handsome, pretty, short, tall, fat, skinny? What physical characteristics will they have? Profession. What do they do for a living? College professor, which is a character in the latest book, Pringle Prawn. Are they highly
military?
What's that?
Military? Are they police officers?
Military? Are they civilian?
Are they a professor, a scientist?
And I think too is the genre in which you're writing. So we both write in the fantasy sci-fi genre for the most part, although you're multi-genre, and I guess to a point I am as well. But it depends on the genre you're writing in too, because if you've got someone who's, again, we've gone through all those check-off lists: personality, physical appearance, what do they do for a living, that sort of thing.
What time is it in for the Chain Reaction? I had to find names that were in 1813. So I literally looked up a census from 1813 to find names of the most popular, what's, the most used. Then I did 1922. What's the most popular? I actually looked up the censuses because they have all the names listed. So it's like time period. Definite.
Actually, the research like you're describing is pretty important because of the time period. And I found also, and you mentioned this a little bit earlier, what is the nationality
Mhm.
of your character or minor character? For example, I have a couple of Russians, unsavory characters in my latest, the book I'm writing now, Pringle Braun. And so I looked up Russian names,
Mhm.
did research on that. And whereas you might, I guess, this is kind of a fine point, but whereas if we're talking about common English names that you mentioned before, Smith and Jones and Miller,
Mhm.
okay, which people who are English speaking readily recognize. Maybe you do want a common name
Mhm.
for, say, a Russian character because of the familiarity. So that when a person says Ivan
Mhm.
or Georgie, or something like that, or has the last name of Romanov or something, they know immediately that the character, even though you've probably already described it, it fits the Russian personality or persona. So doing research like that is important as well for
Mhm.
answers as well as planners.
Definitely. And it's like trying to figure out, like for example, the Team Angel series, they were from all over the world. So I literally had to go to those particular common names in this. And it's like wanted some common names, but I didn't want names like John,
Sure.
you know. And so I had to I kind of skimmed through that list because usually they'll give you like the top 100 or top 50. So it gives you some opportunities to kind
Right.
of look through them. But again, I always put them through the baby name site because I wanted to know what they mean. That is one area that I don't shortcut being a pantser is with names. They're like, for example, Herman Williams is actually a former security person from Holly Lake Ranch where we used to live, and his name is William Herman. His character's name is Herman Williams. So it's like you kind of it's already there. Sometimes they're already there, and you can readily flip them around. One of the field training officer, his first name is the same of the guy that I interviewed for that particular spot, and he said, "You can use my name as long as you don't kill me." And trust me, that was not easy, but it could have given him a spectacular death. But it's like sometimes the names are already there. Sometimes they'll hit you. Katie McKenna's. I knew I wanted her name to be Katie. Casey Carter. I knew I wanted her name to be Casey Carter. It wasn't a matter of looking it up. It said I knew this is what her name needed to be.
There's a lot of nuances that go into picking names.
Hmm.
For example, even common last names we've seen like Jones and Smith. Okay, you can turn that around and get a uh, a memorable name for a character whose name is Smith Allister
Hmm.
or Carter Jones or something like that, and especially with last names, they're kind of pretentious. So you might, for example, want to use a last name first for a character that may be upscale, rich, or wealthy.
Hmm.
You but
Like one of my
there's
characters' names, his first name was Jackson. I called him Jax, Jax. So it's like sometimes you can come up with some cute nicknames for names that are, kind of older.
yep, nicknames.
Hmm.
Nicknames are that could be a whole other podcast on because nicknames um, are very memorable
Hmm.
and they're meant to be that way. They're meant to stick within the mind of the reader.
Hmm.
So now, if you use them, it's like anything else. If you use them to excess, of course, it becomes, you know, you actually could have the opposite effect. You lose readers or bore them. But nicknames can be very important,
Hmm.
and I like them because, like I said, they tend to be more memorable, even if you pick a first name and last name for a character that just squarely fits that person or personage. So that's a good point.
Yeah, like one of them, Katie's eventual nickname is Kit Kat because she likes Kit Kats. but they shortened it to Kit. You know, there's different things that you can do with it and different ways that you can look at it. In normal society, if you have a long name like Allison, it will inevitably be shortened to Allie
Right.
or
It's-
Al.
My wife is a big fan of Robert B. Parker, who writes mystery movies or mystery thrillers. And he passed away, I think, about 10 years ago. But he made, there were about 8 or 9 made for TV movies that it's a guy that was in Magnum PI.
Tom Selleck.
Tom Selleck was, they based, he was the star in the 8 or 9 movies that they made about the Robert B. Parker books. But one of the of Parker, he, long story, you know, sort of synopsis short, is he moves to a small town in around near Boston and takes the role of chief of police. So one of his deputies, for some reason, strikes him as a suitcase. I never did figure that one out. I'm sure if I'd read the books, there might be a little backstory to that. So he called him Suit. I don't know what his first, it might have been Don, his first name, but he never called him by his proper name. He didn't call him Suitcase. He called him Suit. Now, you know, there, you don't forget that, you know, whether it's in a book or in a movie.
Or like in NCIS, when Michael Weatherly's character kept calling the one guy Mick whatever because his last name had the MC in the beginning. You know, he'd come up with all these cute little nicknames with the Mick part, and I cannot remember what his real last name is, but, you know, little inside jokes kind of help with nicknames too. For example, if somebody was good on volleyball, Spike.
There you go.
You know, and I know a lot of military, firefighter, EMS sort of stuff. A lot of times they have nicknames on purpose, you know, and those nicknames
They fit there.
kind of match the person.
Mm-hmm. Now you can be too cute with your names, too over the top, you know. So, you know, there's a balance. You don't want you always want your names to fit the character and the profile of the story that you're writing and the genre that you're writing. I think that's just common sense. I don't know that anyone needed to watch our podcast to know that. Or maybe they do. But
well, it's like Renaissance times. The names are going to be extremely different from where they are now. You know, so make sure as an author that you are fitting the name with the time. Some of like Lord of the Rings type fantasy type stuff, the names are going to be unique. They're going to be really different. But then some of the different names, like Harry Potter's Hermione, that's a name that hardly any of us can say, barely spelled, but the name sticks in your head, you know.
You know, if you're coming at like Hermione, for example, if you're giving as opposed to Harry Potter, Harry would be a very common name, but you know, in books, going back to being too cute, you know, when you come up with a killer name for a main character or even a minor character, don't ruin it by trying to top that with the names for everybody else in the story as well. Yes, maybe a few, but if you want whatever character you want to stand out in terms of your description, in terms of having that person really catch the imagination of the reader, then assign them that name, but don't have that in competition, particularly with minor characters who may have bit places and roles in your story as it unfolds.
Just be aware that sometimes people who start off as a minor character decide that they want to stay, and they will.
True.
So just be aware as you go to name a minor character and you're like, oh, it's just a throwaway character. They may not be a throwaway character. They may turn out to be like your favorite character, and you can't kill them and you can't toss them. So just kind of keep that thought in mind when you're going through them. That happened with me. I was going to put them in one book, and it was like, nope. It stayed the entire series.
Well, there's minor characters, and then there's minor characters.
Yeah,
you know,
like the clerk at the grocery store. I mean, unless their part is some sort of a spectacular, they're not going to stick in your mind.
Minor characters can play major roles in the story, and the multiverse. Look at all that's a new term that's been in fashion now for the past 3 or 4 years.
Mhm.
Basically, it's taking other characters in a movie or a book, and like you were saying, going off and having a whole different story with that person, which
Mhm.
kind of gives you endless possibilities in terms of storylines, or in movies, I guess, in different types of movies. So that's true. A minor character can be a major character um, in another book.
Well, even in that book,
Even
unintentionally, because
right.
like I said, the one person I was only going to put him in there for one book and one particular story, and that character pretty much told me no. So I'm like, I'm not going to tell him no if he wants to stay. They're going to stay.
Don't
And
kill them off.
no, so he ended up staying, and he stayed for the entire Divine Legacy series. And so sometimes they just stay. They're just that good of a character that you didn't intend to be that good of a character, that they're just like, nope, I'm staying.
And you know what? That is an advantage to being a pantser
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to a planner. Nothing wrong with being a planner. I'm just want to point that out. That is an advantage of being a pantser. You have the option of making your minor characters into major.
Well,
You
and
have more flexibility. Let's put it that way.
yeah, and as you pointed out, like you can make different series. I plan to take the kids from the Sands of Time trilogy. Remember all 27 of those kids? They're each going to have, well, I have them split into groups, but they're going to have a book dedicated for them, like telling their back and their forward stories. And in doing so, characters that I didn't really intend to hang around are going to be front and foremost in that particular book. For the chain reaction, we had talked about doing anthologies. I may do an anthology and pull some of the minor characters that were just in it for a little bit to a major role in a story later.
Why not?
Yeah, you never know.
That's right. I mean, why? I mean, if you have a story that follows the character, why? Just because they're a minor character doesn't mean that it's not going to be an interesting take on a version or alternative version of the story that you started off with. I mean, I bet if we went back and thought of books that turned into series by authors past and present, we would come up with a very, very long list that did not include the original main character as the focus of those.
Well, the whole Team Angel series. My characters, I didn't initially start where it was going to be 3 to 4 series where the characters crossed over storylines. But because they started doing that, I needed to dive deeper into certain characters, and certain other ones popped up forward. And so in doing that, it allowed me the flexibility. That character had a base to start with, and I was just able to dive deeper into them. And so keep the flexibility when you're writing, and don't toss those characters.
I have a minor character in 3 of my books, The Treasure Hunt Club, The Janus Witch, and the upcoming book that I'm writing, Pringle Prawn. It's Hank Harper, who is minor character, but plays a very important part in each book, because he kind of unrolls the magical adventure that each of the main characters go through. Mm-hmm. And so a light bulb went on, which occasionally happens to me, CJ, not as often as it used to, but occasionally. I thought, you know what, I'll start marketing these as a series, an anthology, because they do share the same minor character who plays a major role in the evolution of each of the stories. I do want to give a quick shout out, if I can, before we close today.
Sure.
I'm running the first chapter contest for the Northeast Texas Writers Organization. We had a first chapter contest, which included a synopsis of an unpublished manuscript and the first chapter of the unpublished manuscript. We had 4 judges who were judging the entirety of the synopsis and the first chapter. And of course, there was a word count limit. And anyway, this is our 3rd year to do this. And we have had some excellent entries. And I want to shout out to a lot of local authors who live in and around the Texas and East Texas region. And we have some outstanding writers. and who have turned in some excellent pieces. And I just wanted to, to give a shout out to all those who took part in the contest. We will be announcing the winners at the Spring Writers Conference this Saturday at the conclusion of the conference.
Awesome. Well, and we're looking forward to it. So for those who are interested, go to netwo.org and sign up for Saturday. So next week, May 3rd, we're going to have an author, Greg Little, who's going to be talking dystopian sci-fi. So super excited. I've talked to him a little bit and excited to have him on. So don't miss it. Same time, same sandbox. We'll catch you next week for Greg Little for dystopian sci-fi. In the meantime, have a good one. Bye.